Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate, the post-regionals, pre-super regionals edition. And along with Maren Angus Combs, the softball writer for Hail Varsity, I'm Nate Rohr, the play-by-play voice of Nebraska softball, and I've got my bright orange polo on because I'm going golfing because our season's over. No, just kidding. It was the first thing I grabbed that was clean, that was a decent color, and I typically don't wear Husker stuff on this podcast because we talk about everybody, and very proud of the season the Huskers had and the showing they had in regionals. But orange polo today for me.
You headed to the Knoxville Super Regional, right?
Yeah, well, and note, it's bright orange. It sure as hell is not burnt orange. Rocky Top, you'll always be. You can fill in the rest. Let's go Vols. Get it done this weekend. So we're chatting about the regionals. We'll chat about the Huskers stay down in Stillwater, the thrilling come-from-behind victory over Wichita State on Saturday night, and then the regional final loss to Oklahoma State on Sunday. And then we'll talk with two of the players involved in regionals. One finishing her career in regionals, Courtney Wallace, the Huskers' workhorse of a right-handed pitcher. And then one just getting her career going, Ruby Meylan, the terrific freshman pitcher for the Washington Huskies. They were kind of dangling over the cliff in their regional final against McNeese State, trailing 6-0 in the top of the seventh inning. And then they score 7 runs.
As the rain began to fall. Let's not skip that part because the weather was dry for that game until the 7th inning when Washington got up to bat. It was like the softball gods came through and said, the Huskies are moving on, and I'm going to do what it takes to help.
Yeah, you would think of the two teams in that scenario, the team most comfortable in the rain would be Washington, and apparently they were, as they were able to surge back into that game, put up 7 runs. And, you know, on one hand, you feel happy for Washington, right? Because that's just a remarkable comeback and just so exciting for that program. On the other hand, you feel really bad for McNeese State, especially from the standpoint that they're, you know, though they are a very good program, they don't get to this point very often. And the fact that they were so close to advancing further into Super Regionals.
1 out away.
Mm-hmm.
1 out away. And, you know, as a coach, you have to probably go replay that in your head. Like,
sure,
he's gonna be replaying that game for a long time. You know, could he have pulled his pitcher?
Mm-hmm.
Could he have, maybe fought for a rain delay?
Sure. I mean, and that's a worthy consideration. I mean, you talk about the rain coming down at just the wrong time. That brings to mind the Sunday game against Nebraska and Northwestern, when the rain really helped Northwestern in the 5th inning. I don't think there's any question. I mean, you think of the ground ball Caitlin Kaneda mishandled where she just lost her grip on the ball. And that never happened to her. Didn't happen to her in the 40-some games before. Didn't happen to her in the 15 games after. And yet there in the rain, she lost her grip on the ball, and that allowed a run to score. And that was part of Northwestern's big comeback. So, a tough spot for McNeese, and you feel bad for them. And I'm sure they asked for a rain delay or maybe questioned it a little bit, but you know, in the end, it's in the umpire's hands. And the other thing is, do you really want to kick up that big a distraction in that big a moment?
Probably not.
Yeah.
You're trying to stay in the moment, right?
Sure.
You want your pitcher to be in the moment. You want your team to be in the moment and really, understand what is happening. But it's just when you start to lose the momentum, you got to be able to put a stop to it somehow.
Sure.
And I don't think they ever got that opportunity. They never were able to put a stop to that momentum until the lead was gone.
Yeah. The enduring image for me from that game, and we were watching it on the bus, The game with Oklahoma State had ended, so we were on the bus. The girls went in, showered, and got ready for the bus ride home. But we were watching the end of that game, and Ashley Vallejo, and forgive me if the pronunciation's wrong, but the pitcher for McNeese was just lost, just sobbing. And I can't blame her. I mean, I'm sure she felt like she should have been able to hold on to that lead and was not able to. And you feel bad for a kid in that moment, even though, I mean, hey, Washington had plenty to feel good about. Well, we've talked quite a bit about the Seattle Regional, but of course our eyes were very tightly focused on the Stillwater Regional. And Nebraska plays in the regional final, finishes in the regional final, losing to Oklahoma State, ends up with a 2-2 record. I think overall, that's this Husker softball team, and maybe we can get a little more into sort of the writ large season wrap up next week, but this Husker softball team met expectations. I think they were a team that you expected to take a step forward in NCAAs. I think they were a team you expected to compete in the Big Ten. They did that, and the fact that they were able to get to the regional final, win 2 games down in Stillwater, including slaying the Wichita State Dragon, I think that makes this weekend a success.
I would agree. I think if we're at the beginning of the year, we're talking about an expectation of the Huskers playing in a regional. We're talking about, could playing in a regional final, could they get to a super? Maybe. But as soon as Kaylin Kinney went down, I think our expectations maybe changed a little bit, because it is so hard to get through the season with 2 arms. And so I think at least for me, I thought, you know what, if they make a regional, great. If they are a 2 seed, that's even better. If they're a 3 seed, okay. But, I really hoped they would get in, but I just was so worried that they were going to run out of gas. And just because it's so hard to only have 2 pitchers.
Sure.
And so by them getting into the tournament, being a top 4 seed in the conference tournament, and doing what they did, I think they kind of surpassed my expectations. And and then getting to the point where they slayed Wichita State, and how they did it. And then having a lead in a regional final. It just, I think they surpassed expectations.
The expectations and the ceiling for the season definitely changed on the Kinney injury, but I want to review that Wichita State game because it was the best of this team on display, even though it was a game that Nebraska trailed 6-3 going to the bottom of the 7th. And all year long, one thing Rhonda Revelle has told me, one thing that this team has been able to lean on, is the idea that they'll get up off the mat, that they don't let yesterday beat them today. They might get beat today, but it's because, Northwestern or Wichita State or whomever executed. But the fact that they got up off the mat, they're down 3. They've got the bottom half of the order due in the 7th inning, and you're thinking, well, it's going to take something for a comeback to happen here. And yet they got to the plate with confidence. They were able to get that inning going. The home run by Neal brings them right back into that game, a 1-run game. I think that is the finest hour of this team, showing that they would continue to compete and continue to fight even when it looked rough.
Yeah, and I think once Caitlin Neal hit that home run, you could feel the energy completely change, right? You could see Wichita State getting nervous. You could see as they pan to the dugout, like, oh no, what's happening? And then you pan to the Husker dugout and they're going crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I think you could see the energy shift in that one swing. And then you knew the Huskers were in the fight, right? And from then on, every inning, you were just hanging on with every pitch.
Yeah. And the other part is they come back in the top of the ninth. Wichita State puts up 2 runs, top of their order. Puts up 2 runs. The Huskers get right back off the mat. Felder hits the home run to where you're a bloop in the blast away from tying that game. Felder's home run in that moment was huge.
Huge. And a massive shot.
Yeah.
I mean, massive. So that home run, everything, you could just, I felt it. I was on the edge of the bed watching, right? Because it's like going on midnight. And I'm on the edge of the bed watching. I'm holding my puppy in my lap. And I'm just like, this is going to happen. They're going to pull this out.
Yeah. And Wichita State had beaten Nebraska 3 times. They beat them in an ugly game Friday night in Wichita in March. They broke their hearts Friday night in Stillwater. Wichita State came back and won that thing in the first round. So, the other outgrowth of this is that you don't have Wichita State hanging over your head, because I haven't seen the non-conference schedule. I assume Nebraska will play Wichita State next
They have to
in non-conference. And so they don't have that thing that they don't feel like they have your number. One other thought before we get to our first interview of the day. How about the end of the game? Alex Aguilar, who throws the pitch for Wichita State, freshman. Caitlin Kaneda, who hits the ball for Nebraska, freshman. Second baseman, Sammy Hood, who fields the ball for Wichita State, freshman. Big moment, and it was all down to the young kids, and Kaneda was able to put the ball in play and drive in the game-winning run for the Huskers. So, fun night. Really the highlight of the season, especially looking back on it. The Arizona win from April has lost some luster, but a special night for Husker softball. And, personally for me, one of my favorite games that I've had the privilege of covering during my time with Nebraska softball. And one of my favorite players to cover for the Huskers is Courtney Wallace, and she carried this team with toughness all season long, and she takes a moment from her retirement, essentially, to join us here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. Well, our first interview of 2 with 2 pitchers who have been very active in the NCAA regionals is with Nebraska's Courtney Wallace, who really carried the load this year for the Big Red. 222 innings pitched out of 373 the team played. So basically 2/3 of the innings the Huskers played. Number 23 was in the circle, record of 25-16, 3.50 ERA. And she concluded a great Husker career by pitching in the regional final for Nebraska against Oklahoma State in Stillwater. And she joins us here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. First off, Courtney, just how does it feel to be at the end of the road of your college softball career and knowing you've thrown your last pitch as a Nebraska Cornhusker?
Yeah, I would say the day after the tournament ended, so after we were coming back home, it kind of felt like I was going through a breakup a little bit. It was a little sad. I cried the next day and that morning. But I've said I'm very grateful for my experience and my journey. I wouldn't take anything back, and I left everything on the field. So everything that I've wanted to do, I've done. And I'm just, like I said, grateful to walk away in that way.
It's obvious you left everything on the field, especially the workload you had all season long, where you were pitching 3-4 games a weekend during the non-conference, and you pitched 22 out of 23 Big Ten games this year. So you were in the circle basically every game, especially down the stretch. Mm-hmm. What was your recovery process like, and how did that change this year as opposed to last year when you were able to split more time with Olivia Farrell?
Yeah, so the recovery for me was more on Mondays when we had them off, I wouldn't even leave the house. If I did, it would be for like rehab at like 9 in the morning, and then I'd come back and I'd be in the house all day. Luckily, like with school, I was all online, so I didn't have to leave the house for school.
Hmm.
And then last year, I think I was able. The only difference really last year, I was just like able to spend more time on hitting when I wasn't throwing. So I was able to like spend more time with Miller and like go in for individuals and stuff like that. Where this year I actually like made the decision essentially to like not be in the lineup due to like the workload that I was gonna have. And I also had like a hand injury that I couldn't really be in the lineup from Arizona. And so I think the recovery part, I just like spent a lot of time in bed sleeping, trying to catch up on sleep and eating. But other than that, it wasn't that much different.
How long would it take for your body to feel normal after those weekends? I mean, were you good by Tuesday? Were you back to 100%, or did it take longer this year because you were pitching more?
Yeah, I think honestly, compared to like my other years, I would get sore like the next day. Whereas like this year, I would get like 2 days sore. So I'd be sore like Tuesday, Wednesday, and then like really stretching on Thursday for Friday and the weekend. So it took like a little longer for my body to like feel what I was doing, but by the time like my adrenaline was going, like I didn't really feel sore. I mean, some days in the bullpen, I was like really like trying to get my arm to go in a circle, but I would get it going once they're like, okay, you're going in. I'm like, all right, I'm ready. But yeah, I would get a little sore longer than normal.
Chatting with now former Husker pitcher Courtney Wallace. I don't like saying that, but unfortunately that is the case here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. Let's zoom out a little bit to the beginning of your Husker career. And when you came into this program, you were a two-way player. And I don't know if you were entirely comfortable with being a pitcher first, if you kind of wanted to split your time between pitching and hitting. What was that sort of process like for you to define what you were going to be for this Husker program?
When I first came in, I'm so sorry, my dog is growling. When I first came in, I was like okay with not pitching. I mean, at that time we had Liv, Lindsey Wall, Jasper, Reagan Mergel. Like we had a staff at that time, so I was okay. I played third, played in the outfield, DP. Like I was okay with what I was doing until I was needed. My sophomore year, I ended up tearing my labrum, so I wasn't throwing that much either. From diving in the outfield. So then I didn't play in the outfield anymore after that. And then my junior year, I had kind of like matured a little bit in the circle. Like I started to understand a little more of what was expected of me. But I think at the beginning, I was like okay with not pitching. I was like, that's how I was. That's how I grew up. I played multiple positions. I was like I would go wherever I was needed. I was good, but like I was raw, like spin wise, velocity wise. Like I could throw hard and get people to like get out, but like I didn't have movement or like anything like that. So like I was okay with not pitching. And then I think as I got older, I was just like, okay, like this is what like I came here to do. This is like my role, and this is what I want. I want the ball. And I would say that started like after my sophomore year, after COVID actually. So that was kind of my story going into that.
Yeah, stepping up as a pitcher. And you mentioned it a little bit, but how did you grow as a pitcher? How did you develop as a pitcher as you put a little more focus on it and as you defined yourself more as a pitcher?
Yeah, I think when I was before, I remember this very well. I remember when I had committed, I think Coach Revelle knew that I was a pitcher, but I wasn't in love with pitching at that time. And she would always tell me, like, my freshman and sophomore year, like, we're going to get you to fall in love with pitching. And I would just be like, yeah, okay, Coach Revelle, like, pitching, I'll figure it out. But I think I, like, genuinely fell in love with just being in control of something and having to go through certain things. Like, some days they were very hard. I'm going to be completely honest. There's some days I wanted to quit and like, I don't want to pitch anymore, but I just kind of like stuck it out and tried to like always find my reason why I was pitching, why I did what I did. And I think the maturing was just honestly falling in love with it and not loving it, but being in love with it.
And you talk about, your why and why you wanted to pitch and why you wanted to play softball. What was that why?
I think my biggest inspirations, like growing up, were honestly always like Monica Abbott, Kat Osterman, just like those like staples of pitching. Also like Natasha Wallace, just because she was a hitter, and like that was one. And Peaches James, one of the only like Black softball players that I knew growing up at the time. And I think as I got older and got to college and kind of just like started learning on my own what I liked, what I didn't like, what my goals were, things like that. My whys honestly started to become like the people around me, like my parents, my family, why the money we've spent, these things. Like I wanted to make everyone proud and do those things. And just like every time we would go to a game, there's a little girl knowing who I am, and I may not know who she is, but the fact that she could come up to me and say, I wear 23 because of you, or I do this, and just those things started to become my why. And I think if you don't go through certain things, you don't get to figure out your why. So like everything that has happened to me in my career, I'm very grateful that I've gone through, and I probably wouldn't be where I am without those things. So
You mentioned Peaches, and you have this unique journey that's similar to hers, right? You played at the same high school, you played at the same university. So have you ever had conversations with her like throughout your career, and now, when you look at your career both in high school and in college and the similarities, what does that say to you?
yeah, I actually took a few lessons from Peaches when I was probably about like 12, 13, maybe a little older than that. She used to be in the Quakes facility when I was in like high school with Todd, and that was that connection. So I got to meet Peaches. Every time I see her at Nebraska events, we talk, and very grateful to like know her and have someone that has gone through what you've been through. Her family they are just awesome. Um, and there's honestly a lot of similarities in our careers, just like from Papio to Nebraska, pitching, hitting. But I think we like are very different in some ways too. But like I'm very grateful to like have her as a role model in my life.
We'll wrap it up on this. The program itself, when you came in, Nebraska had missed regionals the last couple of years. They missed regionals the first couple years of your career, but as you emerged as a leader, this program got back to a place where where the program was really meeting its goals. How much does that mean to you that very definitively you leave this program in a better place than you found it?
Yeah. I think when I came in, everyone knows we were going through some things and kind of essentially hit rock bottom for the program. And after COVID and going into like my junior year after that, we were just like tired of losing. Like we didn't want to be that program that just like poops to bed essentially all the time. And I think once I had Liv and Carly, who also like, we all had the same vision, ironically at the same time, like right after season ended, we had like all texted each other. It was kind of weird actually. It was just like, that's all I had ever wanted, even coming into the program. Like all I ever wanted was to win, was to pack bowling, was to go to a regional, go to a super, like that's all I had ever wanted. And that's in our post game circle after regionals, I like was crying, but I was like able to express that's all I ever wanted for Nebraska softball, for Coach Ravel, Sipple, and Miller, and for them to feel like there is no longer a 10-year gap. Like they can do that every year. And I feel like I've accomplished that. And I'm just very, again, grateful to have accomplished it and to have done that for them.
Well, I can tell you, I'm sure the coaches have expressed similar thoughts to you, but just from my perspective as somebody who's observed this program for a long time, you've accomplished that mission, and this program in the next few years is going to stand on your shoulders and build from the efforts that you put in, and I know you put in big ones. So as a fan of Husker softball and a follower of that program, thank you, and We wish you well, and we hope to see you around bowling in the coming years as a fan.
Yes, I'll be there.
Sounds good. Take care, Courtney. And again, congratulations on a terrific career, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we go from one pitcher who is just wrapping up her career to a pitcher who has just gotten out to a great start in her career, Washington's Ruby Meylan. She was a part of the Husky team that made an astonishing comeback in the regional final against McNeese State, winning 7-6 in that, if necessary, game in the regional final to clinch the Seattle Regional and win their way into Supers, where they'll take on the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. And Ruby joins us now here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. And Ruby, first off, just take us through your emotions as Washington was mounting that comeback, and you're down 6-0 to McNeese State in a regional final, and then all of a sudden, here come the Huskies.
Well, it was like a whirlwind, and I did not recover until about yesterday. Like, it was like emotionally like a roller coaster. But after losing the first game, well, we had beat McNeese the day before on that Saturday, and after losing the first game, it's kind of like, oh gosh, like a reality check, like, oh, well, this could be it. Like, and so going into that game starting, I was a little like on edge a little bit. Like I was for sure nervous, and I don't get nervous very much, but I was just knowing that like McNeese is a scrappy team and you don't hear about them very much, but they are like scrappy, and they had beat us previously in the season, like week 2. So, that was crazy. And then I didn't have my best performance, so I got pulled, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I really just like messed this up for my team, because our goal is obviously the World Series and to win a national championship. So I was like really upset with myself, but knowing that my team has my back, just like going forward at UW, like it's just so cool. And it was crazy. Like tears were shed. I was bawling like a baby. I was like, oh my God, I love you guys. Like you literally just have my back. And they were all so excited, and everyone was so happy. So it was crazy, but it was like a really cool experience to be part of that, because that's going to be one of the most historic games ever played at Husky Stadium. So
from your perspective, you're down 6-3 at this point, right? Bases are loaded, and you've got Bailey Klingler up. I mean, that can it get any more perfect than that?
I mean, you think like even the first game, bases were loaded in the 7th. We were down 1-0, and I was like, Bailey's gonna go yard. But I think it was cool that Bay like beat out a ground ball, and then Sammy comes up and hits a freaking base clearing triple. It was just crazy, and it's cool because I felt like everyone in the lineup had like played the role. Like Lana comes in off the bench and gets a walk. Like that's huge, and like everyone's role in that moment, I feel like kind of just fell into place. It was really cool.
Chatting with Washington pitcher Ruby Meylan here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. And Ruby, let's look at your season so far. I mean, you've been Washington's leading pitcher this year, record of 17-5, a 2.27 ERA. You've gotten the most work in terms of innings pitched. What has surprised you the most about pitching in the Pac-12 as much as you have?
I think it was kind of a reality check starting to pack, because I started preseason like really well, like was getting all this hype from everyone, and it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like this is so awesome, whatever. And then pack hits, and it's like Oregon, my first pack start at home. I was like, it was a Friday night game. It was like late, it was dark, and then the stadium's full. And I look up before I throw the first pitch. I'm like, I have never played in front of this many people, and it's so loud. And I think the first 2 to 3 weeks of Pac-12 were like a reality check, because I've never played someone 3 times in 3 days. Like they scout you, they know everything about you, they know what you're gonna throw in each count. Like that's all like literally on the internet. Like, so I think I had a lot of ups and downs during conference play, but it was something that it was like hard for me. Like I was struggling in the middle of the season a lot, like with just like self-doubt and stuff like that. But I think going through that now, I'm like the most confident I've ever been. So it's been a really, really good experience for me. And I've been through stuff that most people don't get to go through until their junior or senior year. So I think it's cool that we can build off of this season. But it's been awesome.
How quickly did you have to adapt from going to, being an ace in high school, pitching, club ball, to all of a sudden you're the pitcher at Washington? Like, how much of a learning curve is that?
It was huge. I mean, coming in, I knew that it was going to be a really big role to fill because Gabby Plain's gone. It's like that's Washington's ace the last 5 years. But I think it's good that, like I said, like got to go through all this as a freshman. Like it's been a hard year, but it's also been a really, really rewarding year because I've got to see all the work that I put in throughout high school and like the fall of this year come into play and like beating teams that I used to watch at the World Series. Like it's a cool thing that I got to do as a 19-year-old.
Chatting with Ruby Meylan here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. I mean, how long did it sort of take for you to settle in as a college pitcher? You mentioned you had some success in non-conference play and tournament season. How long did it take for you to feel comfortable at this level?
Well, like I said, like the preseason for me was not easy, but I didn't go through any really failure. Like I don't think I lost a game in preseason. My ERA was like 0.5. It was like I was kind of like mowing through teams, but then it took a little bit. So first week of PAC, we play Oregon, who's a really offensive team. So that was like crazy because they scored and they hit the ball hard. And then we play UCLA week 2, which is crazy because obviously it's UCLA and we beat them game 1. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're so good, whatever. And then game 3, I start and they hit 3 home runs in the first 2 innings or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I sat down with my coaches and I was like, what can I do? Because I feel like in the big moments I've been getting like nervous and it was weird. So we kind of like try to figure out my routine on the field, like in between pitches. So now like I've implemented like breathing and just like having a focal point on the field. So that's honestly been the most helpful thing. It's not mechanical. Like I know how to pitch. I know what to do. Like ultimately when I miss my spots and stuff like that, it's more so mental or I'm like rushing the process and stuff like that. So that's something that I've learned throughout the season and especially in PAC play.
You mentioned pitching against UCLA, and I don't think we can have this conversation without mentioning UCLA not getting out of their regional. So how wild is it for you? I don't know. Has UCLA ever not been in the World Series in your lifetime?
I don't remember a time that's happened. I mean, I've been watching the World Series for a long time, and I feel like it's always UCLA, Oklahoma, Florida State. It's weird that UCLA won't be there. It's also we always want Pac-12 teams to get to the World Series just because like we believe in our conference, but it's also weird knowing that UCLA won't be with us next year. They're gonna be in the Big Ten. So I don't know. It's crazy. I feel bad for Megan Framo. She's someone I looked up to for like a really long time. Just knowing that her career ended like that is sad, but it's okay.
It's mayhem.
Yeah, you guys are the ones still alive carrying the Pac-12
well could have been us.
Sure.
Yeah.
You guys were on the brink, to say the least. This weekend, you've got the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns coming to town. And, it's another mid-major program, but a little deeper tradition and history than McNeese State. And you've heard a little about them, but maybe they don't have the spotlight that a major conference school would have. And yet, great softball tradition. What do you know about the Cajuns getting ready for the super regional matchup?
I know that they're an offensive team. If I'm being honest, I don't really scout because during the beginning of the season, I would sit there and watch film on everyone I played, and I think I would like overthink it. So my coach was like, Ruby, if you throw good pitches in good spots, they're not going to get hit. So we decided I'm not really allowed to scout teams. So I honestly couldn't tell you much about their hitters. I know they have a few hitters hitting in the 300s. That's all I know. I know their pitching's average to decent. Like, I think it's gonna be, if the hitters can score runs and us pitchers can limit runs, I think we'll be okay.
The Crash Davis wisdom. Don't think it can only hurt the ball.
Don't think.
Yeah. Hey, well, hey, we wish you the best of luck this weekend against the Raging Cajuns. Don't think too much, and perhaps you guys can continue to carry the banner for the Pac-12 into the Women's College World Series. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you. Go Dogs.
There you go. There's Ruby Meylan, the star freshman pitcher of the Washington Huskies, and great matchup for them this weekend against Louisiana. Big contrast in terms of teams and in terms of setups. Going to be a very nice test for them.
Oh yeah, especially after that, whatever we can call it, that
absurdity.
I mean, I was actually watching the game on my phone when it was tied at 6, and then my phone died.
Heck of a time for your phone to die.
I went crazy. But I'm happy for Ruby. It just goes to tell you like how much talent really is from here when you look at, you look at her, you look at what Courtney just did in her career, and then it's crazy to think about that when Ruby was in high school, like her catcher was a Kamenzen twin.
Sure.
And they both made all conference in their freshman year. So I mean, it's nuts to see all of the success that these kids are having.
It certainly speaks well to the quality of softball in the state, and we shall see what Ruby Meylan does on the national stage this weekend for Washington against the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, one of 8 super regionals that we'll be chatting about next week here on Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. And for Maren Angus Combs, for Ruby Meylan, and for Courtney Wallace, Nate Rohr saying thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.